Hi everybody. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all in good form. We're just getting out of this terrible lockdown that we've been in, and it's great because we can see people now. We can get in touch with our family members that we haven't seen properly for the last God knows how long. It just feels like a long time. So it's a great time, I think, because we can just relax a little bit and begin to move back to what we used to consider to be normal. And it's a lovely thing to do. But it's a time too of reflection because we don't know where we're going. Lauren spoke during the week and Sean Mullen spoke last week about this idea that we are going into a new world and we don't know what that world is going to look like. And that's scary because we're used to being in a certain way, acting in a certain way, behaving with other people in a certain way, and all of that is going to change. So it begins to make us think about the fundamentals of what we expect and what we consider to be normal. It's a scary time too, because we wonder how we're going to cope when the things that we consider as our normal supports, like going to church on a Sunday morning and meeting people and being part of a large group, when that's taken away from us and we don't have that anymore, that can be scary. But this is not the first time that Christians have faced something like this. If you think of what the early Christians were like, for instance, in the early book of Acts, you think about what the disciples and all the followers were feeling after the crucifixion. We have many references in the Bible of them meeting in rooms and hiding in rooms practically, because they didn't know what was going to happen. Everything that they understood about their world had been taken away from them. Jesus was no longer there. The whole bedrock of their being was just not there anymore. It was gone. What was the future going to hold for them? Were they going to be persecuted? Did they have to go home to their homes and forget about this Jesus thing altogether? They didn't know what was going to happen. But they survived all of this because they went out into the world and they forged a new world. And this is our opportunity to go out into the world and forge maybe a new world, a new church, a new way of relating to people as Christians. So as we start to reflect on where we're going, we need to look at this perhaps not as a problem, what are we going to do, but as an opportunity, what are we going to do? And we need to think again, maybe, about what it was that Jesus is asking us, or asking of us. We have been reassessing our lives, I think, many of us, as we are in lockdown. We've been wondering, well, are the things that I thought were important before, are they important? What is important? What is really meaningful for us? Lauren's asked us to reflect on what's meaningful for church for us. What have we missed? And he's asking for feedback, and we should all be thinking about that. What is important for us in regards to our church going forward? What do we hope to retain? What can we let go? What can we do differently? Opportunities abound for us because we can start to do lots of things differently. So we need to reflect. We also need to reflect on what our personal commitment to Jesus is like. How are we relating to Jesus? How are our lives reflecting that relationship with Jesus? Is it going to change? Does it need to change? In what way is it going to change? So on thinking about this, I was looking through the passages, and I came across the passage that's actually for next week, not for this week. And it's Matthew, verse 10, or chapter 10, starting at verse 29. And I'm going to read it now in a moment. And it's all about what Jesus is asking for us. Now, the context for this is that Jesus, in the preceding passage, has been telling the disciples what they are to do when they go out to evangelize. How they are to go, what they are to bring with them, what they are to do when they get rejected, what to expect. And not to expect much, to expect that people will reject them and people will not treat them very well and will maybe bully them and maybe come down on them, that it won't be that easy. And then he goes on to this passage starting at verse 29, and he's explaining to them what their personal commitment should be like and what he has to offer and what the context for all of this is. So I'm going to read that, and I'm going to read it now from the Message version of the Bible, because quite frankly the NIV version, I find it confusing sometimes. So I like the Message version because it can be it's more straightforward sometimes. So just let me read this and then we'll go through it a little bit. Matthew chapter 10, starting at verse 29, and the heading in the Message is "Forget About Yourself." And it starts off with Jesus telling us that God values us. Verse 29. What's the price of a pet canary? Some loose change, right? And God cares what happens to it even more than you do. He pays even greater attention to you, down to the last detail, even numbering the hairs on your head. So don't be intimidated by all this bully talk. You're worth more than 1,000,000 canaries. Stand up for me against world opinion, and I'll stand up for you before my Father in heaven. But if you turn tail and run, do you think I'll cover for you? Don't think that I've come to make life cozy. I've come to cut, to make a sharp knife cut between son and father, daughter and mother, bride and mother-in-law. Cut through these cozy domestic arrangements and free you for God. Well-meaning family members can be your worst enemies. If you prefer father or mother over me, you don't deserve me. If you prefer son or daughter over me, you don't deserve me. If you don't go all the way with me through thick and thin, you don't deserve me. If your first concern is to look after yourself, you'll never find yourself. But if you forget about yourself and you look to me, you'll find both yourself and me. We are intimately linked in this harvest work. Anyone who accepts what you do accepts me, the one who sent you. Anyone who accepts what I do accepts my Father who sent me. Accepting a messenger of God is as good as being God's messenger. Accepting someone's help is as good as giving someone help. Now, this is a large work I've called you into, but don't be overwhelmed by it. It's best to start small. Give a cool cup of water to someone who is thirsty, for instance. The smallest act of giving or receiving makes you a true apprentice, and you won't lose out a thing. So what's Jesus saying here? It's not an easy message. It's not an easy message at all. Jesus has been quite demanding. But he starts off with the basic message in verse 29, telling us that we are important to God. You are worth more than 1,000,000 canaries, he says. God is aware of the smallest bird falling from its perch, and we are worth so much more than that. So Jesus is reassuring us. Don't worry. God loves you and will always love you. And then he goes on to say that he has our back. In verse 32 to 33 he says, stand up for me against world opinion, and I'll stand up for you before my Father in heaven. But if you turn tail and run, do you think I'll cover for you? So Jesus is saying, I have your back. If you work for me, if you commit yourself to me, I will commit myself to you. If you don't commit yourself to me, well then, you're on your own. This is a harsh message. Jesus is saying, I'm telling you the truth. It's up to you whether or not you come on board with it. But if you do come on board with it, I will always have your back. And then he goes on to the toughest part of this passage, where he talks about not making life cozy for us. I have come to cut, he says, to make a sharp knife cut between son and father, daughter and mother, bride and mother-in-law. Cut through these domestic arrangements and free you for God. Now, that sounds very harsh. It sounds like, on the face of it, that he's trying to break up families. But of course, Jesus is not trying to break up families at all. What he's talking about here are the authoritarian structures that were in place at the time, where sons were expected to obey without question their fathers, mothers were expected to obey without question or daughters were expected to obey without question their mother. The mother-in-law had a huge influence on the young bride in the household, overwhelming her often. These were the authoritarian figures. Now what Jesus is saying here is that we have to break out, because his message and adherence to his message is more important than any of these things. And that we have to be prepared to break out of the normal structures and the normal authority and go beyond that, because if we want to propound Jesus' message, we have to be fully committed to it, and we have to be prepared to break away from that. So we can't be afraid of upsetting people. We can't be afraid of being perhaps a little bit of an outcast, or people looking at us a bit strangely, or people saying, no, you're different. We have to be prepared to be different. We have to be prepared to step outside the norm and be recognised as being different, and take whatever brickbats come to us because of that. What else does he say? He says that, what else does he say? He says that unless we make this commitment, we will never truly reach our full potential. We will never truly find ourselves. If we are holding back a little bit, if we're putting ourselves first, we won't find ourselves. But if we put Jesus first, and we put Jesus' work first, then we will not only find ourselves, we will find him. And we will find our true selves. And what we find will be wonderful. I give you life in abundance of life as you know it, he tells us elsewhere. So the rewards are there for us. Full commitment he's asking for. Full life he's offering us. This is what Jesus wants. And if we go down then to the end of the passage, he's talking about not being afraid of committing to this. This is a large work I've called you into, but don't be overwhelmed by it, he says. It's best to start small. Give a cool cup of water to someone who is thirsty, for instance, because the smallest act of giving or receiving makes you a true apprentice of mine. We need to bring Jesus into every little act of our lives. This follows from the full commitment that he wants. It has to permeate our lives. And we don't have to be running an evangelical movement somewhere. We just have to be looking after the person beside us, the person living across the road, the person that we know in our church who's hurting at the moment. We have to be aware of where we can help and where we can be of service. The smallest act of giving or receiving makes you a true apprentice, he says. So this is the overall message that Jesus is giving us. This is what he expects us to be. And as we come out of our lockdown now, and we've been reflecting on where we've been and what's important to us and where we're going, we need to reflect on where we fit in to this picture that Jesus have of a true follower of his. How do I stand up? How do I measure up? Is what I was doing before going to be adequate going forward? Do I have to up my game in some way? Do I have to do something differently? Am I going to treat emerging from lockdown, entering into a new world, as a problem or as a great opportunity to do something more for Jesus? Can I get involved in more small groups, for instance, because we can meet now in small groups? Can I get more involved in online services, online meetings? Can I do more Bible studies? Can I do more outreach with the church that I'm involved in? Or can I do more outreach in my street? Can I meet the person across the road whom I haven't seen properly for the last 6 or 8 weeks? But now I can come out, and now I can go and I can talk, and now I can see what they're doing. Where are the opportunities for me to live my life as a Christian, to be a true follower of Jesus? The world is changing. There's just no doubt about it. It's not going to be the same as it was before. But this can be an exciting time as well as a detrimental time. This can be a time where we can say, hey, there's other things that we can do. There are other ways of relating to each other. Let's grab these opportunities. Let's take them in our hands and say, now I can begin to really make a difference as a follower of Jesus. People are open to new ideas. People are open to hearing about new things. There's a new world coming. We can't stop it, so let's embrace it. Let's be a true follower of Jesus. Amen.